So it's interesting, um, getting old enough and seeing like young the generation after you were younger generation, looking at the time period you might have grown up in as like and looking at like idealistic. Uh, I don't know, kind of. I'm used to like things going retro stuff like that, but not like like fashion coming back or remakes of shows or movies stuff like that. But to say take a time period, it's like oh, this was a better time. I find it interesting since actually was in the time period. I don't know. At first, for me, I noticed it like I was watching something, uh, ASMR video, and they mentioned being '90s fine, and like took me like that's interesting, '90s fine, and then I realized that I guess hit me that the '90s there was a wave of like black romance movies and stuff that came out, so I could see that because it's like the image of someone, a guy like from romance movies, romantic lead and stuff. Uh, and it kind of made me think, like, I think the YouTuber was like probably in her 20s. And thinking when I was in my 20s, uh, we were looking at like the 70s in a way, thinking that was a big better time. Like, I was in college and like we were trying to do like events or get people involved in social issues. People felt like, oh, people aren't involved. It was like the 70s. It would, be like that. And it was like that in the style, stuff like that. Um, you know, because so you had like black exploitation movies, the image of like and Black Panthers, of course. But so we have I think the image of people doing stuff, and I was like, my period, we were wishing it, and now it's interesting seeing a period. It's interesting because that's a period of time before we were around, like I was born in the '80s, so or some people a little bit older, maybe like very young, like babies, maybe so that so it's interesting, and like and I kind of made this video because I just had like a conversation, well, like an online a group, and it made me think about it because this guy had, like I said, uh, kind of had a negative view of black women now that are now in favor of the '90s because he think he's well, in his view that then went like thugs, and it's interesting growing up because he was like saying that was like that in the '90s, and he was like talking about really wasn't around at the time. And it's interesting because that was like the rise of gangster rap music, and he mentioned I gave him example like, are you basing this in real life? Because some of the things he made me realize that he might have been um, in the corner of the internet where people complain about relationships and stuff, and that could have shaped his view. But you mentioned high school, and I was thinking, if you're talking about younger black women, then I could see him have run into that because that happened in the '90s. It was like gangster rap was getting big and stuff like that. Um, but his problem was he was looking. He just only focused on those who were one of the thug type and stuff like that. So I had a conversation with him. Might reach him a little bit, not fully, but he did to a point where he said, "Okay, not all." Before he was like, "All black women want that." And he was like, "Okay, not all, but he's still on the most." But baby steps. And so it's just interesting because he was probably coming from a similar place, like see the black romance movie and stuff like that. But and I thought about it how things changes are sometimes the same. Because you have like now there's like big gender wars on like the internet. People make channels and stuff like that. But back in the '90s, that was still kind of true, but we didn't really. The internet was there, but not everyone was on it. But if as much as we are now, um, so that wasn't well. You probably find some forms. It was different, but there were like daytime talk shows like Ricky Lake, Ricky Lake, and stuff like that, where people be on there and be like, men ain't shit and blah blah blah. Kind of similar to now, you have people make their own YouTube videos and they're like, women ain't, it's, and I feel like that was trapped in. So, uh, but like you said, he thought it was better, but it's more perspective, I would say. Like he was too focused. Like I told him, like if you were back then, he would have had similar experience because he was focused. He would miss the ones that aren't. I just thought that, but and I realized that I remember having not really confident. It was when I was in college. Um, we had sometimes you have speakers, and they had Bobby Seale came in, and I do remember him talking about how our generation, I did '70s, but even then they had people like because it made like everyone was part of the movement trying to make things better, but everyone wasn't like that back then, and it's kind of like that now. Idealizing, it's what you make of it. Um, you know, um, so be careful about idolizing different time periods, I want to say. And I don't know, like you have this '90s fine idea, and I guess there's aesthetics. Um, I mean, the '70s had its own aesthetics and stuff like that. We copied the '90s, and we see people still copy it today. So I guess it's kind of odd thing about aesthetically something that's happening. But yeah, that's it just made me think how like that guy was down on people now, but the in the past was really his own issues of I don't want to say issues, but yeah, no, it was like focusing on who didn't want him instead of who did. But like I don't know, it seems like an odd jump. It is that I see it came as similar to idealizing the past and not realizing, looking bad at the present when they both have good and bads. And sometimes, like in that guy's case, the issue he had isn't. Well, I don't think it was. I mean, I'm sure he didn't. I'm not going to dismiss, like he was talking about high school, that he, dealt with people saying that he wasn't hood enough or stuff like that. I was like, we should that. Or girls, when a gangster gay. But that happened in the '90s as well. The only problem is, it's what you focus on, and I think that's a problem. I see people focus. It's a trap. You can focus on the people that don't want you, or the people that do. And that's what I tried to tell them, but I don't know. And I just wanted to make a video because I thought it was interesting the '90s back, but also because I see a lot of things online that people push to divide on gender, like what is that, and like or like how, like I'm probably wonder if he's like I said, fell on that part of the internet. And as I said, I want to give the message that you might think, oh, it was a better time period then, and maybe, but not. I mean, it was pretty much almost the same in a lot of ways. But like it's what you make it. Even '90s fine. This time period they also have its own aesthetics and stuff like that. And it'll be interesting seeing 30 years what people will be like to tweet, bringing that up and how fine it is and what they would complain about. Will it be relationships? Like, I guess people, looking at the '90s now, comparing stuff now to then, even though sometimes it's, the internet changed a little bit, but it was the same a little bit. You find, or like when I was younger, they looked at the '70s and social movements. Like, what would be 30 years from now? That'd be interesting. All right, this was a thought. I don't know. I'm just rambling on. Bye, everyone.